For more on this issue, we want to bring in Cynthia Lummis, a former Wyoming congresswoman and the founding member of the House Freedom Caucus.
So let's start with that Freedom Caucus thing, shall we? This is an ultra-right-wing branch of the U.S. House of Representatives. And yes, our own Cynthia Lummis was a founding member. This is the group that declared that famously anti-gay and pro-flag John Bonner was too liberal. It's the group that led the charge to shut down the government in order to stop the Affordable Care Act, which has since helped hundreds of thousands of people not, suffer needlessly and die. Bonner is still salty about the whole thing and has actually said about them, they can't tell you what they're for. They can tell you everything they're against. They want total chaos, tear it all down and start over. That's where their mindset is. They also ejected a member who called for the impeachment of Donald Trump. And this is the same wing of the party who are wandering around Wyoming telling half of our state Republicans that they are rhinos, Republicans in name only. The Freedom Caucus has literally zero on compassionate and reasonable governance, but gets high marks on political infighting and game playing. No wonder she loves Donald Trump so much. He has literally spent his time in office when not golfing, dismantling decades-old programs that actually help people.
She's currently running for the Senate as a no-nonsense conservative, and she joins us now. So thank you very much for joining us tonight. We just kind of went over some of the president and the DOJ's immigration policies, specifically when it comes to sanctuary cities. What is your response on the Justice Department's latest action?
Well, it's important that the Justice Department be able to crack down on criminals. It's important they be able to go into courthouses and get them when they have been detained and take them back to their place of origin. And these are all issues that the President and the Department of Justice are trying to address, and I support the President's plan.
Wowza, important to be able to crack down. This whole attitude only makes sense if you don't see immigrants as human beings who deserve human rights protections, which sadly seems to be true of this bunch, especially when the people in question are not white. Never mind that immigrants actually commit fewer crimes than people who are born here. Besides, aren't you all about states' rights and local control? Apparently not when it comes to communities being able to protect their own people. Sanctuary cities are a moral movement in response to the rise of xenophobic crackdowns like this one.
And Cynthia, you've been in the House of Representatives before, and now you're vying to be in the Senate. This seems like a proposal that when you talk to the average day American, it just kind of makes sense. And of course, there are ideological divides in the country in general, but especially in the legislature right now. What are the hurdles right now in order to get immigration policies done, whether it be sanctuary city policies or when it comes to the southern border?
What are the hurdles, he asks. Perhaps the fact that at least some people in DC have some shred of compassionate care for their fellow human beings. Somehow I doubt that's Representative Lummis's answer, though.
Well, it's very important that like-minded members of the U.S. Senate get together and put together proposals that, working with the White House, have the opportunity to pass. Now, in this hyper-partisan time we're in, that's going to be a particular hurdle. But I believe President Trump is going to be reelected. And I believe when he is reelected, the opportunity to put hyper-partisanship aside and begin to work on some of these issues that benefit first-generation Americans as well as eighth-generation Americans is absolutely timely.
That's actually hilarious. Can we say Freedom Caucus? You can't even cooperate within your own party, let alone across the aisle. And re-electing Trump the impeached would somehow decrease partisanship because you expect people to just stop noticing that he's a fascist who hangs out with fascists and stop resisting that? Pretty much no chance in hell. Donald Trump has made it abundantly clear that he stands for the rights of white, straight, American-born Christian people only. And while he talks a decent line for working class people, when it comes to action, it's really only those with enough money to be useful to him. Now, I understand that you are one of his chosen ones. But that's a lot of division, Representative Lummis. You are choosing a small portion of people to side with, and it doesn't even include most of your voters. And what about those first-generation Americans who are currently terrified that you and your cronies are going to remove their parents, their grandparents, their siblings and cousins? I've talked to people in the immigrant community, and regardless of whether they are naturalized citizens, DACA recipients, undocumented people, or those first-generation Americans you are talking about, they are frankly terrified right now because the kinds of policies that you're talking about are literally tearing communities apart. So don't hold your breath.
Now, you decided not to run in 2016, and now you're once again picking up your campaign, this time for the Senate. You're trying to go for the upper chamber. What is your reason now for re-entering politics at this time?
Well, I'm reinvigorated, and I'm also concerned about our debt and our deficit. I had worked with the Committee for a Responsible Federal Budget on some of their proposals when I was in Congress. And as I have watched their work and read their reports since I've been out of Congress, I've become concerned, reinvigorated, re-energized to go back into the fight, particularly to fight our debt and our deficit.
Wait, you're concerned about the debt? But you're basically running on, I have Trump's back, the back of the man who has increased our national debt by $1.1 trillion just in the last 12 months. Okay, Boomer. Seriously, if that's the thing that's motivating you to run, you are deeply confused about things and should probably just sit this one out.
That it is unsustainable. We risk debasing our currency, making it less and less valuable to the American people who've worked so hard for it. So that's the real motivating factor behind my run.
And it comes at a time, too, where you're going to be running in the same election where a lot of these Democrat candidates are pushing for very reformative, expansive, and expensive proposals. I mean, we could talk about eliminating student loan debt. We could talk about Medicare for all, things such as that. What is your solution to some of those things that you may not necessarily even find plausible, judging by what you just said? Do you think that there needs to be a balanced budget amendment? Do you think there needs to be a stop pay gap type thing? What does the U.S. legislature need to do in order to really address the issues that you're concerned about?
We need to have real pay-as-you-go proposals, and which means, of course, that we propose budgets that we will commit to pay for. And if my party that believes in no new taxes, and I believe in that as well, wants to pass a budget, they need to cut spending. And if the Democrats who believe in higher taxes and higher spending want to propose these higher spending budgets, they need to propose the taxes to cover their budget. And then we need to get together and resolve these issues.
Don't you just love the never-ending platitudes that have literally no relationship with reality on the ground? So no new taxes for public services because you'd rather pay not just for those services, but also for outrageous CEO salaries and shareholder profits, apparently as the main mechanism for getting things done, right? How about no new tax cuts for your friends instead? Because, prior to Trump, our national debt wasn't actually skyrocketing, but it sure is now.
Right now, neither party is looking to spending cuts or, in the case of the Democrats, tax increases. Everybody's looking at piling on more debt to future generations to solve the problem. And that in itself is unsustainable.
Wow, you know what actually is an unsustainable debt to future generations? Climate disruption. If we do nothing, costs of damage in the US alone are estimated in the hundreds of billions of dollars a year. Even if you add up every last plan that Bernie Sanders has put out there, it's a fraction of the cost of what ignoring that one crisis is going to cost us in the long run, not to mention millions of lives.
And it seems like both parties right now are kind of kicking the can down the road when it comes to this issue. I mean, the White House just released its budget proposal, which is very expensive as well, but they're actually looking to cut some of the deficit over the next 10 years. But every year we kind of hear about an expanded budget. We hear, especially from Democrats, about these expansive proposals, as we were just talking about. What do you think that the problem is, I guess I should rather say, of why they don't necessarily care about the deficit or the budget or anything like that? I mean, for example, you're concerned about term limits as well. That's something that you vocalized in the past. What is it? Corruption? Is it just incompetence? Do they not want to face the political backlash? What is the issue there?
I think it is the failure to want to face political backlash. They want to give people good roads, benefits, higher salaries, a strong military, and all these things need to be balanced against what we are willing to pay for as Americans. So there are several things we can do. Term limits is one of them. Having a biennial budget, so we're budgeting for 2 years, not one, that would give the Defense Department certainly some comfort that they have the ability to plan ahead. That would be true of other departments as well.
And what is this DREC? They want to give people good roads, benefits, higher wages, which all sound pretty good to me. And those needs have to be balanced while you want to give the Department of Defense some comfort. Aren't they supposed to be protecting us? How about giving some comfort to your average American who can't afford rent in any state in the country? Or, roads that are actually maintained, and heaven forbid people have health care, but sure, let's comfort the military, which meanwhile gets over half of our federal spending. No questions asked. Priorities, Cynthia, priorities.
Block granting funding to states is a way to help minimize the amount of money we're spending on massive federal programs when the states can administer these programs. All we need to do at the federal level is to block grant it to the states and then make sure the states are spending it for the purposes that were intended. This would save a great deal of money in terms of the size and scope of the federal government and return to the states under the 10th Amendment to the U.S. Constitution the intended purpose and rights of our states, the people who live in it.
Wait. So let me get this straight. Passing money down to the states to administer programs would make the federal government smaller, even though that money would still be coming from the federal budget. And wouldn't it make state governments bigger? So what sleight of hand is this in the whole big government, small government debate? I mean, it's just weird. And by the way, Cynthia, you know perfectly well that you live in a state that has left millions of dollars of US government money on the table and not picked it up for years that could be being used to provide health care just because they don't want to take federal funds because of the same glorification of small government. You are also always on the hunt for ways to sell off federal lands to the states, many of whom have said they don't have the bandwidth to actually administer those lands, conveniently leading to them being sold off to the highest bidders, many of whom are your donors. So really, what you're saying is, let's let people die. Let's let public lands just be sold off. Let's do anything and everything to preserve the facade of being a small government advocate while actually just not doing your job of upholding government of the people, by the people, and for the people. That's some very slick and stinky bullshit you got going on there.
Yeah, and for all of our viewers, you can find out more about Cynthia's policy proposals at lummisforwyoming.com.
Yeah, don't bother going to Cynthia's website if you actually wanted to learn something. I will show you the sum total of policy that Representative Lummis has listed on her website. Yep, that's it. I mean, it really seems like it is more designed to obfuscate than inform, that website. But don't worry, we're going to keep sharing information with you during the campaign so you know who has your back and who doesn't. I'm Yana Ludwig, running for United States Senate against Cynthia Lummis, and I approve of this message, at least my parts of it.